Welcome to the Beau Show podcast. This is episode 2, right here on iHeart Podcast, your source for great information, enlightenment, and entertainment. Today's show, for those of you who will be listening, we're going to be talking about Donald Trump's first 100 days in office. It's hard to believe it's been 100 days since the president got elected again, but here we are, 100 days in. And of course, he has a big rally coming up later today in Macomb County, Michigan. We'll cover a little bit of that, some of his accomplishments, things that we think that he'll be talking about. And then we want to discuss probably one element that Trump even may address in today's rally, which is anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism at Harvard, especially, Columbia University, even my own alma mater, Northwestern University. They've kind of jumped into the mix. And we'll be discussing even Jewish humor because my guest today on the Beau Show is going to be Sal Litvak. Sal is a comedian. He's an author. He's a filmmaker. He went to Harvard, and he's called them a disgrace. He went to Harvard for undergrad. He went to NYU Law, and he also went to UCLA in grad school for film and television. So he's a filmmaker, a content creator, and he's got a really interesting take on today's events. And I thought it would be actually interesting to talk to a comedian because, let's be honest, in a world of kind of desolate, depressing news, the news cycle can get cumbersome. It can get just downright, overwhelming. And I think sometimes we need to be lighthearted in our approach. For those of you that have seen some of the content that I create on social media, you'll know that I try to bring an element of humor, parody, satire. For those of you listening to my first episode of the podcast, you'll notice that I threw kind of some things in there from little digital shorts that I've created. And we're going to have one here in a little bit as well that I wanted to throw in here because I thought about it after Donald Trump's first 100 days. So it'll be interesting to talk with Sal today and get his take on what Harvard is doing in terms of pushing back on the Trump administration with regard to anti-Semitism and viewpoint diversity and freezing $2.2 billion in funds and $600 million in contracts. This is a big showdown. This is like what they call in the Wild Wild West the showdown at the OK Corral. This is shaping up to be an epic battle between the world's oldest college, an elite university, and the Trump administration. Trump has struck out at Harvard before and tried to nail them on viewpoint diversity and some of the things that they promote, especially left-wing causes, left-wing ideology. So we have to see how this thing shapes out because it very well could end up in the Supreme Court. But first of all, let's talk about this 100-day rally that Trump is holding today. You know, he said when he became president, even before he became president, I'm going to continue to do rallies throughout my presidency. And he's making good on that promise today in Macomb County, Michigan, a state that he won. He lost in the last time around, and then he won this time around. We're talking about automakers and manufacturing and things like how the tariffs are going to impact our American workers. I'm sure he's going to address a lot of that. But let's talk about just some of the accomplishments that I think he'll probably touch on today in his rally. So some of those things that kind of stuck out to me were, first of all, protecting pro-life, the pro-life movement. He pardoned 23 pro-life advocates in just his first 100 days. He defunded foreign taxpayer-funded abortions. That was a big deal. He withheld tens of millions of dollars from Planned Parenthood. And this is, by the way, what he's doing, if you're wondering about its popularity. 73% of Americans oppose federally funded foreign abortions. That's a lot. That's 3 out of 4, basically. And 57% of Americans oppose federally funded abortions right here at home. So he still has a majority on that. So if you think about it, that's actually what he did is very popular. I didn't actually, until I saw those stats, wasn't sure exactly how popular it was, but apparently it is. Another accomplishment of his first 100 days, eradicating radical gender ideology. He said he was going to do it. And again, another promise made, promise kept. Protecting children from genital mutilation and castration and restoring, my God, it's hard to believe to say this, biological truth. Biological honesty that man is man and woman is woman. He created an executive order. You may have seen it when Riley Gaines was in the Oval Office, protecting women's sports and prosecuting Title IX violations. We had a situation in the last administration where the line between man and woman blurred, apparently, and they wanted biological boys to be competing in women's sports, and it cost girls opportunities in college, opportunities for track scholarships. You remember Leah Thomas, which was born a man and said he was a woman and was swimming against Riley Gaines. That has changed. So that was a big deal, I think, to reestablish gender reality and gender truth. On the faith front, faith and religion, he released a faith-forward Easter message. I covered this about a week ago because I created an Easter special right here for Rav. It was a monologue, really, a very long, beautiful, faith-forward message. It wasn't just a, hey, I'm the president and I got to wish everyone happy Easter. It really was so much more than that. In fact, in talking to Pastor Jonathan Shuttlesworth, who I interviewed for the Easter special, it was maybe one of the most pro-faith, pro-Christian messages from a president we've ever seen. I have to think some of that came from his brush with death in the assassination attempt where the bullet grazed his ear. I think he's come to understand God a little bit better. A lot of people with near-death experiences actually do that. So he promoted faith. And this is a big contrast in Easter if you think about it. 4 years ago, or actually not even 4 years ago, 1 year ago, when Biden on Easter posted that it was Trans Day of Visibility, National Trans Day of Visibility. Now, the vast majority of Americans, even if you're not religious, celebrate Easter. Whether you celebrate the Easter Bunny or whether you celebrate our resurrected Christ, it's still about Easter. It's still about what this holiday has represented for a long, long time. And of course, really, it's about, again, the resurrection of our Lord and Savior. But Biden didn't think that was important. His Easter message was about Trans Day of Visibility. What a contrast. And he also instituted measures to protect religious liberty, which is important too. Christians being persecuted all over the world. Another big pillar of the first 100 days, securing the border. Tom Homan has come out, no nonsense, common sense Tom Homan saying, this is what we're going to do. You need to self-deport. We're coming after you. This is the law. The law is the law. Obama didn't enforce it. Biden didn't enforce it. I'm going to enforce it. So Tom Homan has been a new sheriff in town. He reinstated the Remain in Mexico policy. He designated Tren de Aragua and MS-13 as terrorist organizations. And border crossings, as a result, have decreased immensely. Proportionally, it's unbelievable how many illegal border crossings there are now compared to where they were just a year ago, and especially over the past 4 years. So border security, I know he's going to talk about later on today, because it has been a pillar. Again, once again, promise made, promise kept. And then national sovereignty has been a pillar of his first 100 days. He withdrew from the World Health Organization, which is, by the way, run by the CCP, or at least controlled by them. Who's going to believe the World Health Organization when the CCP is who basically created COVID? So it probably makes sense to get rid of the getting out of the WHO. He instituted investigations of many world organizations like the World Trade Organization, UNESCO, the International Criminal Court. These are all these multinational global conglomerates that don't really have the United States' best interest at heart. And then on education, what did he say? I'm going to get rid of the Department of Education. Well, he's started to take steps to do that. He told Linda McMahon, you need to, I'm giving you this position, but you really need to find a way to get rid of your position. And that process has begun. It's a radical idea, but I understand it. I think most people listening understand it. Why are students not competitive anymore? What has happened? DEI and wokeness have overtaken so many of our schools. We saw this in the pandemic. When people could see through Zoom what our kids were being taught, it was unbelievable. And you've got tenured professors, even on the collegiate level, that are promoting more ideology than they are education. So education, he began rooting out DEI. And then Doge. Doge may be, in my opinion, maybe the most significant action and accomplishment of this first 100 days. The Department of Government Efficiency finding billions of dollars, I don't know, maybe even be up to trillions now, in waste, fraud, and abuse under Elon Musk. Of course, Elon has faced a lot of scrutiny for this. Just driving down in Florida just this last weekend, there are Tesla protests everywhere. They're upset with the man, the myth, the legend. They're upset with the man who created a beautiful electric car and who has created a SpaceX that has, with Starlink, has done some amazing technological things, but they hate him. They hate him. Why? Because he's investigating fraud and waste that nobody was willing to look at. And now you're starting to see states, at least red states, around the country start to implement a statewide Doge. Shouldn't every state have a Doge? Doesn't that make sense to you? Wouldn't you want to eliminate waste, fraud, and abuse and keep that money, have it go back to the taxpayer? And then, of course, I'm sure he'll talk about tariffs. It's been a little bit unpopular here in the United States because people don't understand it, but he's trying to recalibrate the balance between us and our trading partners, and especially sticking it to China. It's who's going to flinch first? I don't know. I think it'll be China because they need American consumers. So I imagine he'll talk about that, especially with the auto workers, because he wants to bring manufacturing jobs back into the United States. Because, people that travel overseas, I think it was Geraldo Rivera who got back from Japan. He said, you don't see any American cars at all. They don't take our cars, but we're supposed to take theirs. Well, you need to maybe recalibrate that. And look at what Marco Rubio has done. I think he's been an excellent Secretary of State. He's rebooting and retooling the entire Department of State. Finding out again, where's the waste, where's the fraud, where's the abuse? Let's get rid of that. Let's get rid of the DEI hiring. That's got to go. So this first 100 days of the Trump 2.0 presidency has been very significant. FDR was measured by his for getting the New Deal passed, I believe, in the first 3 months. And that's how a lot of times presidents are measured in terms of their success. But I think this is quite a contrast from Joe Biden's first 100 days. In fact, back at that time, I created this mini opera. For those of you that don't know, I was trained in voice and opera at Northwestern University. And sure, opera is cool. Well, it's dwindling actually in popularity. But I thought, how can you make opera fun, make it accessible, make it comedic? And if you guys remember, for those of you who watched Saturday Night Live when Adam Sandler was on the show, he had a character called Opera Man. He would go on Weekend Update and he would basically deliver news headlines through an operatic voice. Now, Adam's not an actual opera singer, but he made it very funny. And it made you remember what the news headlines were. So I decided, hey, maybe we should recreate that and try to do the same, except tell the American people some truths about what's actually happening, and especially about Joe Biden's his first 100 days. So as a contrast to what Trump has done, let's take a listen to the little mini opera that I created on Biden's first 100 days. Let's take a listen.
100 days, 100 days. Jojo Biden, with the press he's been a-hiding, takes a questions very rarely. Air Force One is a little scary. Most of questions for Jen Psaki, all she say she circle backy. Bigger problem with the border, 100,000s and many more. Oh, says he don't like kids in cages, so he just put them in containers. The vaccine. He sent the Tony Fauci to put on double masky. He cannot throw a baseball, he threw like Senorita. People say he fine now, but he give cash to China. John Kerry, why you always look so scary? You give secrets to Irani, while Trump whacks Soleimani. You know good at the diplomati, but I wouldn't mess with Bibi. Taxes, watch your tax go up. Think you make a money, but now you are... Mom and Papa trying to make a cash. So how do you reward them? You hit them with tax. Gasoline getting very high. And what is your solution? A green deal, why? Climate change, must stop cows from a farto, but we can seem to prevent. Eric Swall, welcome flatulenzo. Joe Biden, 100 days you are riding. Just try not to be so woke, and please don't tax me, bro.
All right, so you see a big contrast in Biden's first 100 days versus Trump's 100 days. And as I'm watching this back again, which I haven't done in a long time, think about the issues that were happening at that time. Gasoline prices, do you remember that? Remember how high they got? He was woke. He caved into DEI and wokeness. And you look at what John Kerry was doing. And I mentioned Trump whacking Soleimani. That's still happening today with what we're doing with the Houthis and being able to take out terrorists, designating MS-13 and Tren de Aragua as terrorist organizations. This did not happen in the first 100 days of Biden or in his entire administration. The double mask thing. I mean, like, you look back at this and it's like, did this even happen? Is this really a chapter in American history that people were putting on 2 masks? It's ridiculous. So maybe I'll have to revamp the first 100 days of the Trump administration with an opera. We'll see. But that's, of course, is a comedic way of the realism of what is actually happening in America under Joe Biden and now under Donald Trump. And of course, we have to talk about the rise of anti-Semitism. This has been an interesting fight that Trump has waged against elite universities, where we have seen protesters that are agitated and may even be funded, I'd be willing to bet, going to these college campuses and creating a system of havoc and chaos and a lack of safety for Jewish students. So this is a microcosm, really, of what is happening in Israel and in Palestine. It's happening right here in America, but fortunately for us, we have the freedom of speech. But at what point does freedom of speech get usurped by hate speech or by violence or banding together so Jewish students can't get to class? You know, these demands that Trump has made on Harvard, I don't think are that unreasonable. I believe in free speech. I believe we have to have free speech. People should be able to protest whatever the hell they want to protest. But when it gets to a point where it's causing another group to fear for their lives because they can't go to class, they feel scared about learning, America's colleges are supposed to be laboratories of learning. Should be the safest place in the world. And I don't mean safe space like they tried to make it before. I'm talking about a safe place to learn, to grow, to experiment. So Columbia, Harvard, and Northwestern, my alma mater, are inflection points right now. Trump froze $2.2 billion in federal funding to Harvard due to this anti-Semitic activity that they've had in protest, and $60 million in contracts. Trump has called Harvard a disgrace. And I can't say that that's that wrong, to be honest with you. But so the heart and the soul of the matter here, since we are on iHeart, is that college campuses are supposed to be places of learning, not blind activism. It's not supposed to be where you go just join the local protest and hope for the best. You need to know what you're protesting and why. They also, as I said, should be safe places, not safe spaces, if you understand the distinction that I'm making. They should be safe places, not hostile places to grow and learn. But unfortunately, these colleges have promoted left-wing causes almost across the board. And they permitted pro-Palestinian, pro-Hamas protest, which has caused waves of anti-Semitism. They've been blocking classrooms, as I said, and stoking fear, stoking hatred. And the vast majority, I think, of the people who are doing this don't even understand really what's at stake. They're protesting. Why? Because they can. Because nobody else will tell them not to. And places like Harvard that are supposed to be our pillars of education, our elite universities where we train the best of the best, are now creating campuses of fear. And that is exactly what is the heart and soul of the matter, which I will delve into with my guest today. My guest today is Sal Litvak. He was born in Santiago, Chile. He moved to New York at the age of 5. He went to Harvard, NYU Law, and UCLA for film and theater, a school that I looked at actually at that time. For film and theater myself. We have a lot more in common than he probably thinks. He wrote and produced and directed Saving Lincoln, as told through the eyes of Lincoln's bodyguard. His first hit film was the Passover cult comedy, When Do We Eat? Can't wait to talk about that one. I think that's going to be good. And he blogs as the Accidental Talmudist for the Jewish Journal of Los Angeles. And his upcoming book is a fun one. It's called Let My People Laugh, Greatest Jewish Jokes of All Time. Well, Sal, shalom aleichem and l'chaim.
Aleichem shalom. Good to be with you, Beau.
It's good to be with you. So a goy from Tennessee and a Jewish guy from Chile go on a podcast. What's the rest of this joke?
That's what is it? The rabbit and the priest and the imam walk into a bar, and the rabbit says, "I must be a typo."
That's great. That's great. I'm just now getting that now, Sal. It's great. That's a great joke. Well, let's start out like I always like to do with my guests, with just kind of from the beginning. Let's start out with your history as a Jewish kid from Chile, coming to New York, and maybe which New York accent you picked up.
I was in the city for a few years, living in Riverdale, and then we moved out to the suburbs. I don't think I have an accent, but strangely, a lot of people tell me I do sound like a New Yorker. So I suppose it must be true.
Yeah, my fiance she's from Paraguay, but she came to Long Island at probably about the same time you did, 4 or 5. I think she has a pretty significant Long Island accent. She's from Mineola, and I hear her say things certain times like mall, walk. They just kind of pop out. Yeah, because she doesn't have any semblance of any sort of Latin American sound, but she of course can speak Spanish fluently. So you grew up as a Jewish kid from Chile, and you came to New York. Obviously, a lot of Jewish folks in New York. Did you feel, I don't know how to describe this, was Jewish culture present in your time in New York? Did you feel like you were assimilating as a Jewish kid in New York?
I mean, very much Jewish culture was present, both in my home and around me. In New City, New York, that's the suburb that we ended up in. We jokingly refer to as Jew City. It really was a very Jewish town. But it was more culturally Jewish than religiously Jewish. Apparently that's changed. It's near Muncie, and Muncie has sort of spread out. As an adult, I got much more connected to Judaism, and I'm an Orthodox Jew now. But in terms of Jewish culture, very strong in my house. My mother and my grandmother, both survivors, were survivors of the Holocaust. Absolute miracle story. My grandmother carried my mother as a baby through a concentration camp. Hard enough to have a baby anywhere. Imagine keeping a baby alive in a camp. She lost her husband, my grandfather, in the Holocaust. My mother never met her father. He was taken away when my grandmother was pregnant. And so the Holocaust and the humor and the food and the holidays, it was all part of my growing up. The actual religious, the faith component of it was not so strong until later in my life.
It's interesting that it came later in life for you. Well, you went to Harvard, which we're going to get into in a minute, but you also went to NYU Law and UCLA in the arts. I attended, as I mentioned, Northwestern for theater and the voice program, the voice and opera program. So we have that in common.
Great program.
It is a great program. I'm very proud of it. Unfortunately, Northwestern and NYU and Columbia and Harvard have something in common, which of course we'll get into. But what drew you to the arts? What made you want to be an artist like you are now?
You know, I didn't know that I could do that growing up. When we got to this country, I was 5 years old. My parents asked around, what do you do in America? And somebody told them, well, the ideal thing would be to go to Harvard and be a doctor. So they said, you're going to go to Harvard and be a doctor. And being 5 years old, I said, okay. And that was the plan from then on. And when I got to Harvard, I actually got very involved on the rowing team. Crew is just every day, hours and hours a day. I did not enjoy my pre-med classes. I switched to an English major because I was enjoying my writing classes. And when I told my parents I'm not going to medical school, they said, well, then obviously you're going to law school. And it was only in law school that I felt like I'm on this conveyor belt, had a slight redirect, but I never put myself on this belt. I never thought about who am I? What is my mission in this world? And when I started to think really deeply about that, and journaling like crazy, just always writing, kind of figuring stuff out by writing about it, just realized I was a writer. And I thought that I would write novels. My heroes were novelists at that time. And then a friend of mine went to film school. And I said, what's that? He said, what do you mean, what's that? You go to learn how to make movies. And I just never knew that that was possible. You know, I'd seen some pretentious student films as an undergrad that had nothing to do with what you see in a movie theater. But an actual program where you could learn to be a film director sounded incredible to me. And somehow I talked my way into UCLA. And thank God I did, because as soon as I landed and started making movies, I realized that's what I was born to do.
Yeah, again, this is so interesting, your path. I started out pre-med at Northwestern, realized that the labs at night conflicted with the performances that I was doing at Con Auditorium, and it didn't work out. So I was like, oh, okay, maybe I'll switch to pre-law. So political science became my minor, and vocal performance became my major, and musical theater was a minor as well. So we had similar paths. But once again, I got out to LA, where you are, working for law firms out there, and they were like, what are you doing working for law firms? You're an artist, do what we didn't do, pursue that path. And you say, yeah, well, but you're making a lot of money and I'm not, there's that sort of, raw awakening that happens. Well, Sal, when you were at Harvard at your time there, what was the culture like then? Did you experience any anti-Semitism at that time?
I did not, none at all. It wasn't very political. And like I said, I was so involved with the rowing. At that time, divesting from South Africa was a bit of a thing. But I never encountered anti-Semitism. I did once in junior high, a kid from the other side of the tracks, actually called me a dirty Jew, which was something that I thought that was only the 1940s. Like, that didn't happen in the modern world. I said, hey, you can't say that to me. And I pushed him, and he was a football player, and he pounded me into the lockers. But, at least I didn't take it. I stood up for myself. At Harvard, there was nothing like that. It's funny. Harvard is something I used to, never talk about. It would be snotty to say, hey, I went to Harvard. Yeah. Now that it's become a badge of shame, yeah, let's talk about Harvard and what's going on there.
Well, great.
It's insane. They completely let down the students. There's this woke agenda there that's infected everything. Even the sciences. You'd think that in the sciences, what are we here to do? Just discover the truth, inspect the truth. The lack of meritocracy. The recent demands from the federal government saying this is what you got to do to keep getting billions of dollars. Mm-hmm. Make sure you cure your anti-Semitism problem. Hire based on merit. Right. Screen your foreign students that they should have terrorist sympathies and want to undermine America. Pretty reasonable stuff. Mm-hmm. And the administration is all up in arms about it. So it's crazy time.
Well, Sal, as kids go to college, and I'm sure this happened with you too, they tend to be encouraged to be active, to be proactive, to maybe even join protests. And in my experience, at least when I went to Northwestern, a lot of that was for leftist causes. What is your take on the issue of campus activism and in terms of free speech? Because I'm sure that's partially going to be Harvard's argument. Well, it's free speech. We have to allow these kids to do whatever they want to do. But what you just said is you don't think the Trump demands are unreasonable at all. It's simple. How are you hiring? What are your admission standards? Can you make this a safe place? Can we just have empirical science rather than wokeist science? What's your take?
Can you have some viewpoint? And viewpoint diversity. That's another request.
Exactly. So
that's so awful. Viewpoint diversity.
Yeah, exactly. Wouldn't that be? When did this change? Because if it didn't happen necessarily when you were there, when did this shift happen at Harvard where it got radicalized into basically an entire leftist agenda, do you think?
It seems to me it's this intersectionality. At some point, identity politics took over, and the most important thing about a person is their immutable characteristics, the color of their skin, their gender, things like that have nothing to do with what you work to attain. The way, what did Martin Luther King say? I want people to be judged by the content of their character. Well, your character is something you can work on. In the Jewish tradition, that's so important to always be improving your character and the way you'll respond under pressure. And so this idea that the most important thing about you is how many different categories you've been victimized in started to reduce everything to, the whole world is oppressors and oppressed. Generally, white males are oppressing everybody else, especially brown people. And then they started applying this calculus that has no application in Israel, where many Jews are brown people. And saying, there's a lot of people dying in Gaza and the West Bank. It must be because white people are oppressing brown people, when that has nothing to do with what's going on over there. You've got a maniacal, homicidal people who consider the existence of Israel a stain on their honor. They'll never accept another country alongside theirs that's a Jewish country. And so they keep attacking. They launched their rockets from schools and hospitals because the retaliation will kill their children. I mean, this is a child sacrificing cult of gangsters, right? Who then, when the aid pours in, they steal half of it, build terrorist infrastructure with most of the rest, and dole out a few pennies to actually feed and clothe people. And then the mainstream media tells the world this, genocide narrative, which is totally false. But the people at places like Harvard, who have big brains and should know better, buy into it. It's unbelievable that we've come this far.
How did they become such a haven for this then? I mean, it seems that, like you said, the biggest brains in the world, our elite institutions, should be the ones that would want to create this, you've heard the word safe space, the safest places in the world where kids should be able to go to class and learn without fear of being prevented from getting in that class. How could they why does Harvard take such a pro-Palestinian, if you want to say it, pro-Hamas, pro-terrorist position?
I mean, listen, I think that the innocent explanation is what I just said. A more cynical explanation is that it's about money. And a guy I know, Gary Wexler, big advertising executive for many, many years. And in the 1980s, people were saying, Israel has a PR problem. And they said, well, let's get a bunch of, really great ad executives, marketing executives, the Don Drapers of our generation to get on this problem. And they met and they had all kinds of meetings and put together teams and said, well, let's find, people in Gaza and the West Bank who want to work with us on this and create peace, because we all want peace. Of course we want peace. Israel's such a tiny sliver in this massive, Muslim Arab world. There's so much room there. There's so much empty space. What's the big deal having little Israel there? And this guy, Gary, met sort of with his opposite number among the Palestinians and said, let's find messaging that's going to create peace. And they're like, you don't get it. That's not what we want. That's not what we're looking for. And then the guy basically explained to him, and Gary said, this is what's happened ever since. They have central control, huge amounts of money, and they kept pounding the message over and over again to where it has infected academia. Sorry.
It's okay.
In this massive way. Like, they funded these departments. Qatar, you see, is behind $500 million at Texas A&M. Like, what's that about? And they're giving more money to Harvard and more money to Columbia. And of course, that money comes with strings attached. And the result is what you're seeing. They're promoting this kind of messaging. I'll say one more thing since you brought this up.
Yeah.
I grew up in New York, nice Jewish kid, not so religious. In that world, the New York Times was the Bible. You could count on the New York Times to tell the truth. I'll tell you when that changed for me. In 2014, I was in Jerusalem shooting some video for our platform, Accidental Talmudist, interviewing modern sages. And there was a terrible attack. 2 terrorists with hatchets came into a synagogue in the early morning during prayers and murdered 4 rabbis, American Jewish rabbis, with hatchets. I mean, just butchery. And an Arab policeman, a Druze Arab policeman, came in, fought them, stopped the killing, and ended up sacrificing his own life in the effort. So 5 people were killed, and then other cops came in, and the 2 terrorists were neutralized. We were all crying. We heard about it very quickly. We watched the Israeli news, the facts, and then the BBC picked it up an hour later, and the headline was, Israeli security forces killed 2 Palestinians on that story. And then CNN picked it up very similarly a couple hours later. And when I realized how much the media was lying about a story that I was at that point personally familiar with, so what else are they lying about? And I just realized you cannot trust a media that benefits financially from keeping us terrified and furious at everyone else. And if you want to learn what the truth is, you got to have multiple sources and triangulate.
Yeah, you're 100% right about that, Sal. And it sounds like you're saying that you hold the media culpable for an anti-Israeli, anti-Jewish positioning, that they have been responsible for creating headlines and not telling the truth. Is that accurate?
over and over and over again. I mean, early since October 7th, they accused the hospital, right? That big lie story that New York Times, they do it over and over again. Everyone knows that the Palestinians are launching their rockets from schools and hospitals so that when Israel defends itself, these people will sacrifice innocents, right? Women, children, etc. We know that. Everybody knows that. But the media doesn't report it that way. Why? Because they're making some kind of profit from reporting it this way. And, this reprieve, this respite that we had after the Holocaust that lasted 80 years and Jew haters, were more underground, it's over. These people are perfectly happy to shout their Jew hatred from the rooftops.
Sal, I'm in this musical adaptation to screen called Mendel's Messiah, and it actually opens on Mendel Moskowitz, who's a modern-day Jewish candy shop owner, and his store's been vandalized with graffiti, swastikas, and his windows are broken. And he asks God, why is this happening to me? Why is this happening to my people? And he gets to go back in time and see Yeshua, and in his time to see this. What do you think are the roots? Because we could look at it biblically too, and since you're an Orthodox Jew, I'm sure you'll know a lot about it. The roots of anti-Semitism. This is nothing new, but I just didn't think America would be a haven for
it. Yes, we didn't think so. We didn't think America would be a haven for it. You asked me, why do people hate Jews? What is the historical? I mean, it's a terrible thing. It is as old as the hills, and all these civilizations that thrive for a short time on their Jew hatred have disappeared from the world. I guess it's easy to point the finger at other, especially if you've got a people that tends to come to a new place and succeed and contribute. We were told by God that we have a special mission, and we had to stay a little bit apart. We eat special foods, we dress a certain way, we say separate prayers, and so we're visible. An assimilated Jew looks like everybody else. An Orthodox Jew, I'm normally walking around in a kippah. In my neighborhood, people are, the black suits, the beards, the black hats. We're visible. Mm-hmm. And I guess it's easy to point the finger at somebody who's visibly different, who's successful, and who has been studying. Our people have been studying, how to be wise, how to contribute for thousands of years. And then we get chased out of places, maybe for succeeding too much, and then we start contributing somewhere else.
Yeah, once again, punishment of success. It's unbelievable. Let's go back to Harvard for a second. You mentioned it, this Trump action towards Harvard. They want to ensure safety for the students. They want to look at their hiring and admissions policies, make sure they comply and are fair, make sure their mission is up to snuff, and have viewpoint diversity. As you mentioned, does any of what you see that the Trump administration wants out of Harvard seem unreasonable to you? Does any of it go too far?
None of it. I mean, when you read that letter, you can say, well, there's a lot of demands here, because all the issues that you named are very reasonable. And what the government is saying, we want to see that you're making progress on. Now, this university, who's not used to having to be accountable for itself, is like, well, what does that mean that we're going to be accountable? We're going to have to show who we're hiring. We're going to have to show who we're admitting. I mean, famously, they were sued by an Asian American group for discriminating against Asian Americans, right? And saying that in all their DEI admissions, I mean, who's really paying the price? Asian Americans, very similar to the Jews. I mean, they come here determined to succeed. They work really, really hard. They get very high test scores, and be totally overrepresented at Harvard if it was a meritocracy of admissions. And it was a big lawsuit about that. And so Harvard did not want to reveal those kinds of numbers. And they don't want to reveal the kinds of numbers that will come out as a result of these demands now.
Okay, so let's touch on that, because Sal, I've been getting emails from my own alma mater's president saying that the administration is endangering precious research dollars, the things that we need to advance humanity, to advance society. And I'm amazed that Jewish presidents of universities like my own, and even some Hillel groups, are against Trump's actions. Now, you touched on it a minute ago when you said there may be a financial reason. For instance, Northwestern does have an adjunct campus in Qatar. That's interesting, right?
Yeah.
Why even would Jewish student groups like Hillel groups, why would they oppose this? What do they not like about trying to protect Jewish students on campus and fair standards?
Are we going to be honest? Trump derangement syndrome.
Okay.
You know? if the president had a different name, it would probably be okay.
So if Joe Biden or Barack Obama had done the same thing and said, I want to protect Jewish students, I want to make sure they can get to class, I want to get rid of pro-Palestinian, pro-Gaza supporters because they represent tyranny and terrorism and death, that would be celebrated, you're saying?
Right. Of course. Of course.
That's very unfortunate. I was hoping you'd give me a better outlook than that, but it seems that what you're saying is unfortunately true. And I would say that about the DEI policy. I think it was an Asian American guy named Kenny Xu who was part of a lawsuit against Harvard for discrimination against Asian students because his scores were better than everybody else, but he couldn't get in. Is there any devil's advocate moment here for Harvard to say, it's our university, we can do what we want, we can do what we please? My guess is no, because as long as federal funding is attached, the federal government is allowed to ask questions.
Right. They can absolutely say that. But if they're going to take the federal money, then there's going to be some accountability according to federal laws and federal standards. Now, there's another side to this. I mean, listen, Harvard has a lot of scientific research, medical research that has produced wonderful advances, that people are genuinely benefiting from, cancers cured, treatments that are important, et cetera. And you do want to be careful about how intrusive the government is going to be about that. But what there has to be is some kind of working together and acknowledging that there is a problem. And there is an anti-Semitism problem at Harvard, at Columbia, at Northwestern, at all these schools. There's just a coddling of the anti-Israel groups and a lack of protection for the Jews.
Well, let's shift gears for a moment. I do want to talk about some of your projects because I know you had the hat on there, Guns and Moses, and you've got Tell Me When Do We Eat. Sal, I was in this musical 2 years ago in Nashville called Guess Who's Coming to Seder. It was a fun twist on how this lady who had married a goy, and she was trying to figure out how to have this Seder. She didn't know how and was trying to channel her ancestors to do it. And there was an atheist there, a Methodist, a Buddhist. There were all these different people from different faiths there. Tell me a little bit about When Do We Eat and your hat there as well.
Yeah, so When Do We Eat was our first film, my wife and I. And we hoped it would become the Jewish It's a Wonderful Life. It's a pretty broad comedy set around a Seder, very dysfunctional family. And one of the kids slips dad a dose of a very strong hallucinogen, makes dad think a very authoritarian dad. And now suddenly he's Moses and open to the kinds of healing that this family needs. And over time, thank God, it has become exactly that. Just lots and lots of people around the world watch it every year as Passover is approaching. Mm-hmm. It was Jack Klugman's final movie. I discovered Max Greenfield and Ben Feldman, wow. Shiri Appleby, great performance, Leslie Ann Warren, Michael Lerner. And people love it. It's a broad comedy that also has deep spiritual teachings. And we're just so proud of it and the way that it's gotten out there and become a cult classic. Our new movie, Guns and Moses, is an action thriller, and it's a story of a beloved rabbi in a small town who is forced to become a gunfighter. He becomes an unlikely gunfighter after his community is violently attacked. Starring Mark Feuerstein, Neil McDonough, Christopher Lloyd, Dermot Mulroney, Alona Tal.
Wow.
And, we shot it at the end of 2022. Takes a long time to make a movie, cut it, bring it to market. It's coming out in theaters across America, July 18th. But when we shot it, we never imagined anything like October 7th. We knew that Jews under attack who fight back would always be relevant. But what's happened in the world and since October 7th, unbelievable. As the danger level has been rising over the years, maybe shot up after October 7th, but it was already there. Here in our Orthodox community, we take our safety seriously. Never again. Thank God we have allies, but it also means we have to take responsibility for our own protection. Yeah. Like the rabbi in the movie, I was not a gun guy, but I joined an organization that trains and licenses us volunteers so that we can carry a firearm in synagogue. And please God, we should never need the skills that we have. And we train so much to pass the qualifications. They're tougher than FBI agents have to pass. But we will not be a soft target. And so the training in the movie the rabbi goes through is authentic firearms training. And but we're also able to explore beautiful themes. The rabbi says, in a place where there are no men, strive to be the man. Sometimes you have to decide that there's a problem that only if I don't solve it, no one will. Right? The original commandment is the first commandment that was ever given into the world is be fruitful and multiply. And if that only meant have children, it would have sufficed to say multiply. What does be fruitful mean? It means that, each of us, we don't have souls, we are souls. We have bodies. And we have bodies because we're sent into this world to accomplish something. And if you keep asking yourself, what is the gift that only I can give the world? What is the contribution that only I can make? What is the problem that if I don't solve it, no one will solve it? Then your mission begins to come into focus. And that's the kind of question that the rabbi asked in the movie, and it's a question that we all have to ask ourselves.
Yeah, amen to that. I think that's fantastic. Guns and Moses, that sounds extremely interesting, Sal. Let's talk about a minute about Jewish humor. What is it? Where did it come from? I mean, what are the innate qualities of it? I'm learning this because of this project that I'm in right now, which is written by a Jewish couple. And there's jokes that happen along the way that, I get them, but there's just certain things that may be intrinsic to the culture. Speak a little bit about that, because I know you've got this book, Letting My People Laugh. So tell me a little bit about Jewish humor.
We've had so many highs and lows, a lot of lows for thousands of years. We're a very ancient people, and it's always been part of the culture that we laugh. And we laugh at ourselves, and we laugh at our situation, and it keeps us going in the darkest of times. And it's funny, the oldest recorded joke is in the Bible, right? It's Exodus 14:11. We've come out of Egypt with signs and wonders. We find ourselves with our back to the sea and the most powerful army in the world, Pharaoh and his chariots riding at us to kill us. And the leaders turn to Moses and say, there weren't enough graves in Egypt. You brought us out here to die in the desert. You can hear, Shlomi from Brooklyn saying the same thing.
Right.
And that sense of humor has just always been with us. There's just an irony to it. If you want to make that much more modernized, well, this is the book, Let My People Laugh, Greatest Jewish Jokes of All Time. There's classics, there's lesser known. I've adapted them all to the modern ear. And so, for example, we've been talking a lot about politics. So a rabbi and a Hindu priest and a politician go hiking. They get lost. They end up knocking on a farmer's door. Can we spend the night? Sure, no problem, but I only have a small bedroom with 2 beds. One of you is going to have to sleep in the barn. Hindu priest says, it's no problem. I'll take the barn. The rabbi and the politician settling down for the night, and there's a knock on the bedroom door. It's the Hindu priest. He says, I'm sorry. There's a cow in the barn. I can't sleep beside a holy animal. The rabbi says, no problem. I'll take the barn. What is this camera doing? I'm sorry. And so the rabbi goes out to the barn. A few minutes later, there's a knock on the bedroom door. And the rabbi says, I'm sorry, my friends, there's a pig in the barn. I can't sleep next to that animal. Politician says, let it be remembered, I sacrificed for the greater good. He goes out to the barn. A few minutes later, there's a knock on the bedroom door. It's the cow and the pig.
That's good. That's good, Sal. That's good. I'll admit that I'm a fan of Larry David because of Curb Your Enthusiasm. I would wager that there's a lot of Jewish humor in there. What amazes me about Larry David, though, is he's just a committed leftist. And he got really mad at Bill Maher for going and meeting with Trump. And as you probably know, Bill Maher said, listen, all the things that you thought were crazy about this man, I didn't see, at least on that night. He lambasted him for just going. Why is Larry David, who I do consider to be pretty funny, at least from time to time, he has a good sense of humor, he's written some good material. Why does he have the TDS?
You'd think he'd be smart enough to know better and to say, number one, Bill can go and break bread with somebody and find out what he's all about. And what's that going to hurt, right? It's hard to understand, but, I had my podcast and I had Alan Dershowitz on. And, Larry David said that to Dershowitz after he, worked with Trump on something. Same idea, wouldn't talk to him, led the residents, I guess, of Martha's Vineyard, to ostracize, Alan Dershowitz. Alan can take it. But it seems to be the kind of climate we're in. And it's funny, when I had Alan on, I told him that when I was at Harvard, when I was an undergrad, a friend and I went and visited his class. And Dershowitz was actually teaching one of the cases that he had argued in front of the Supreme Court about two kids, 17 and 19, African-American, who had been manipulated by their father to help him break out of prison. And in the course of that breakout, a guard was murdered. So now the sons were being tried for a death penalty case. Mm-hmm. And he asked, a student in his second year constitutional law class to argue for the death penalty. And then Dershowitz says, yes, well, have you considered? And then he made an unbelievable 10-minute argument against the death penalty that made me feel like, my God, if we live in a country with the death penalty, we're uncivilized savages. We can't have a death penalty. Mm-hmm. Then he asked a student to make an argument against the death penalty. The student summarizes what Dershowitz just said. Right. He says, have you considered? And then he made an argument for 10 minutes in favor of the death penalty that left me feeling in my heart, like if you don't have a death penalty, you've got no society, you've got no chance at a future.
Right.
Unbelievable advocacy. And I was left feeling like, wow, if you ever go to trial, you need a great lawyer. But when I told Dershowitz this, he said, yeah, and now you can't teach that way. You can't argue both sides of any issue in order to teach people how to be an effective advocate. Because if it's the wrong side on some kind of an argument that triggers these students, then the professor gets fired, gets canceled, et cetera. And so places like Harvard have just lost this ability to be objective and to learn how to analyze an issue from all sides.
Yeah, it amazes me, Sal, because I don't know if you remember the episode or you've seen it about when Larry goes to, he wants to eat at the Palestinian chicken. He would rather go eat Palestinian chicken and fraternize with the Palestinian woman that's the owner there than he would sit down with Donald Trump. And I find that amazing because as a comedian, as you know very well, being one and writing this way, that comedians, there's a certain protection level for comedy. There has to be an open-mindedness. But as you just said, if Dershowitz saying, I can't even argue this way because it might be too sensitive for some people, well, Palestinian chicken is funny until you tell the Jewish students, well, if you go do that, you'll get killed because they don't care about you. And that's the reality. I would think a guy like Larry David could recognize that and say, listen, my people are at risk of death for even making a joke like this. And I'm a comedian and I have a duty to protect the First Amendment and my ability to write jokes like this that seem absurd. But yet he doesn't believe in a man who put the embassy back in Jerusalem. It exactly. Blows my mind.
It blows my mind. And somebody who, look at what happened in Paris a few years ago, right? A humor magazine offended a certain part of the population, and then some massive mass murder was the answer. I mean, whose side are you on? Where does justice and truth lie? And if you're a comedian and you can't, see that we need to be able to talk about both sides and make jokes about both sides, that's crazy. It's just crazy.
It is. Well, Sal, I want to wrap this up with you by saying it's been so enjoyable to have you on and to discuss everything under the sun. You've enlightened me about Jewish humor, about the plight, really, of Israel and the Jewish people, and how really in America, I think you said that it was a disgrace, like Trump had said what Harvard is, and I think that's a really unfortunate state of affairs that we have to say that. But I don't know if there's any other president that would take this cause on, and that's sad because they should. So I appreciate...
and he's moving fast and breaking things, and not everything's going to go perfect.
That's right.
But at least he's taking on issues that haven't been taken on before by the government. And let's see where it goes. I think that, I think we can all have a lot of hope that all of us are going to see improvement that really benefits everybody in the next few years. That's my prayer. I
agree, Sal, and I say that prayer with you. Sal Litvak, so thank you so much for being with me today on The Beau Show, and Godspeed to you and God bless.
Oh, man. Great to be with you, Beau. Thanks for having me.